My Apache neighbor kissed me during an argument. Then she said, "That kiss was just for you." He had lived on the edge of the valley for most of his adult life, long enough for the land to feel like part of his body. Every fence post, every dirt path, every change in the wind meant something to him. The ranch was quiet, far from town, and that was exactly how he liked it. He woke before sunrise, worked until the lights softened, and spent evenings sitting on his porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sky change colors. Life was simple, predictable, and steady. That routine changed the day a moving truck appeared on the neighboring land. At first, he didn't pay much attention. People came and went out here. Some stayed a few months, others a year. Most couldn't handle the isolation, but this was different. The woman who stepped out of the truck moved with confidence, not hesitation. She stood tall, surveyed the land like she already understood it, and gave quiet instructions to the driver. She wasn't rushed. She wasn't lost. She belonged. He learned from a ranch hand that she was Apache and that the land had been in her family generations ago. She had returned to take care of it herself. That fact stayed with him longer than he expected. There was something about knowing she had roots here, deeper than fences and papers, that made him see the land differently. Their first interaction was brief. He was repairing a fence near the shared boundary when he noticed her standing a short distance away. She waited instead of interrupting. When he finally looked up, she nodded once. "Fence line, S lining," she said calmly. He wiped his hands on his jeans. "Yeah. Been meaning to straighten it." She didn't smile, didn't frown. "Let me know if you need space on my side." That was it. No small talk, no awkwardness. She turned and walked back toward her property. Yet for the rest of the day, he found himself thinking about how steady her voice had been, how direct her words were. Weeks passed, then months. They crossed paths often but spoke little. Sometimes it was a nod from across the road. Sometimes a short exchange about weather or livestock. She never overshared, never asked personal questions. She carried herself with quiet strength, like someone who had learned early how to rely on herself. The town talked, of course. People always did. Some were curious, some cautious, some openly judgmental. He didn't participate. He wasn't interested in gossip. Still, he noticed how often others tried to define her without truly knowing her. That bothered him more than he expected. One afternoon, he saw her struggling to move a fallen branch blocking a dirt road. Without thinking much, he walked over and helped. They worked in silence for a while. When the road was clear, she leaned on her shovel and finally looked at him. "You don't talk much," she said. He shrugged. "Neither do you." A corner of her mouth lifted slightly. Not quite a smile, but close. Words get wasted sometimes. That moment stayed with him. It felt like a door had opened just a little, enough to let something real pass through. Over time, small moments like that added up. She returned a tool he'd lent her, cleaned and sharpened. She left a basket of fresh vegetables by his porch without explanation. He fixed a broken gate on her land without asking for payment. None of it was discussed. It just happened. Still, there was distance. Not the uncomfortable kind, but a careful one. As if both were aware that stepping too close might change things they weren't ready to face. He noticed her habits. She woke early just like him. She walked the land at sunset, touching the ground with her hand as if greeting it. Sometimes she stood still for long moments, listening to sounds he had long learned to ignore. Watching her made him realize how much he had taken for granted. At night, when the valley grew quiet, he sometimes thought about her alone in her house, surrounded by memories tied to that land. He wondered what had brought her back after so long, but he never asked. Some stories needed space. The tension between them wasn't romantic at first, or at least that's what he told himself. It was awareness, presence, the feeling that something important existed just beyond words. One evening, a storm rolled in fast. Wind howled and rain fell hard. He noticed her horse loose near the shared boundary, clearly frightened. Without hesitation, he grabbed a rope and ran. She appeared from the other side at the same time, soaked and breathless. Together, they calmed the animal and secured it. As the rain slowed, they stood there, water dripping from their clothes, breathing hard. She looked at him, eyes intense but grateful. "Thank you," she said quietly. He nodded. "Any time." The moment passed, but the weight of it didn't. Something had shifted. They had faced a problem together without hesitation, without doubt. After that, conversations grew slightly longer, not by much, but enough. They spoke about land maintenance, about storms, about how the valley used to look years ago. She shared bits of history, careful and measured. He listened, really listened, and learned that the land carried stories far older than his ranch ever would. Despite this growing connection, misunderstandings lingered. He sometimes assumed too much, thinking he understood her silence when he didn't. She sometimes pulled back when things felt too close. Both carried past experiences that shaped their caution. Neither realized how much emotion had been building under the surface. By the time the argument came, it felt sudden, but it was. It was the result of months of unsaid thoughts, crossed assumptions, and unacknowledged feelings. The calm they had built was real but fragile. Standing on his porch one evening, watching the sun dip below the hills, he felt it clearly for the first time. The neighbor he barely knew had become someone he thought about more than he should, someone whose presence affected the rhythm of his days. He didn't know what it meant yet. He only knew that whatever was growing between them couldn't stay quiet forever, and the land, old and patient, seemed to be waiting for what would come next. The tension didn't arrive all at once. It built slowly, like pressure under the ground that no one notices until the earth finally shifts. After that stormy evening with the horse, things between them were different. Not louder, not clearer, just heavier. They spoke more often now, but the words stayed careful. He noticed that when he asked simple questions, she sometimes answered with fewer words than before. Other times, she spoke freely, sharing stories about the land, about seasons from her childhood, about lessons taught by elders long gone. The inconsistency confused him. He didn't know when to lean in and when to step back. He began making assumptions without realizing it. One morning, he found fresh tire tracks crossing near the shared boundary. They cut close to his fence, close enough to disturb the soil he had recently leveled. It wasn't a major issue, but it bothered him. He worked hard to keep things in order. Respect for land to him meant respecting lines. Later that day, he saw her checking a water pipe near the same area. The thought formed before he could stop it. He assumed the tracks were hers. Instead of asking calmly, he let irritation guide his steps. "Hey," he called out, voice sharper than he intended. She turned, sensing the change immediately. "Yes," he pointed toward the ground. "Those tracks near the fence." "You know they're too close." Her brow tightened slightly. "I know where my boundary is." "That's not what it looks like." Silence followed. The air between them felt tight, like before a storm. "You didn't ask," she said calmly. "You accused." He crossed his arms. "I'm just saying it's an issue, and I'm saying you don't know it was me." That stopped him for a moment, but pride pushed him forward. "Then who was it?" "Someone checking the old survey markers, county work." He felt heat rise in his chest, but instead of backing down, he doubled down. "You could have mentioned it." She straightened, her calm hardening into something firmer. "I don't report my every move to you. That's not what I meant." But that's how it sounded. The argument had officially begun. They stood facing each other, the quiet valley suddenly too small. Months of careful distance collapsed into sharp words. He spoke about order, responsibility, boundaries. She spoke about history, respect, and being tired of people assuming things about her land and her choices. "You think because you've been here longer you get to decide how things work," she said. "I never said that. You don't have to say it. It's in how you talk." He shook his head. "You're reading too much into it." "And you're not reading enough," she replied. Each sentence landed harder than the last. Neither raised their voice much, but the intensity made it worse. This wasn't about tire tracks anymore. It was about feeling seen or not seen. He accused her of keeping walls up. She accused him of stepping over lines without understanding them. Old frustrations surfaced, ones neither had admitted even to themselves. "You don't let anyone in," he said finally, frustration slipping through. "You keep everything guarded." Her eyes darkened. "And you think you deserve access." The words hung there. That's when he realized how close they were standing, too close for comfort. Close enough to feel the heat between them, the tension sharp and confusing. He could see the tightness in her jaw, the way her hands clenched and unclenched at her sides. "I never said I deserved anything," he said more quietly. "But you act like you do." The silence stretched again, thicker now. The valley sounds faded as if the land itself was listening. He took a step back, trying to regain control. "This is getting out of hand." She let out a breath, slow and steady. "No, this is just finally honest." That honesty frightened him. He wasn't used to it. He preferred problems with clear solutions, broken fences, sick animals, damaged tools. This wasn't something he could fix with his hands. "You don't trust me," he said. She met his eyes. "Trust isn't automatic." "Neither is respect," he replied before thinking. The moment the words left his mouth, he knew he'd gone too far. Her expression changed, not anger but disappointment. That was worse. "I thought you were different," she said softly. The argument had reached its breaking point. He felt defensive, confused, and suddenly unsure of everything he thought he understood. He wanted to explain himself, to take the words back, but they had already landed. "I respect you," he said quickly. "You just don't make it easy." She laughed once, short and humorless. "Neither do you." They stood there, two stubborn people shaped by their pasts, neither willing to retreat but both feeling the cost of standing their ground. The wind picked up, rustling the grass around them. It felt like the land was urging them to stop, to listen. "You assume silence means distance," she said after a moment. "For me, it means safety." He frowned. "Safety from what?" "From being misunderstood, from being taken the wrong way, from having my history simplified." He hadn't thought of it like that. He'd seen her quiet as avoidance, not protection. "I didn't know," he admitted. "You didn't ask." That stung because it was true. He ran a hand through his hair. "I should have." She nodded once. "Yes, you should have." Another pause. The anger drained, leaving something raw behind. He felt exposed, like he had stepped into territory he didn't know how to navigate. "I'm not trying to control anything," he said more honestly now. "I just don't like feeling shut out." She studied him carefully, as if deciding whether to believe him. Being shut out and being patient are not the same thing. He didn't have an answer to that. The argument had burned itself out, but the aftermath was heavier. Neither felt victorious. Both felt unsettled. "I'm going back," she said, turning away. He watched her walk a few steps, then stopped himself from calling after her. Whatever came next needed space. But as she reached the edge of the boundary, she paused. Not turning around, she spoke quietly. "You're not wrong about one thing." He waited. "I do keep walls," she said, "because once they fall, things change." Then she walked away. He stood alone, staring at the ground where the tire tracks still faintly showed. They no longer mattered. What mattered was the realization that the argument hadn't created the tension, it had revealed it. That night, sleep didn't come easily. He replayed every word, every look. He wondered how something so small had uncovered something so big. He didn't know it yet, but that argument was only the beginning. What followed would change both of them in ways neither had planned. The days after the argument felt strange and unsettled. The land was the same, the routines unchanged, yet something invisible had shifted. He noticed it the moment he woke up the next morning. The quiet felt heavier than before, not peaceful like it usually was, but full of unfinished thoughts. He kept busy, telling himself work would clear his head. Fence repairs, checking water lines, feeding animals, tasks he had done hundreds of times. Still, his mind kept drifting back to her words. "You didn't ask." That sentence stayed with him more than any accusation. He avoided her land for a few days, not out of anger but uncertainty. He didn't know what to say if they crossed paths again. Apologies felt too small. Explanations felt too late. She noticed the distance too. From her side, the silence felt different now. Before, it had been a choice. Now it felt like a wall had been rebuilt, thicker than before. She went about her days as usual, but her thoughts were restless. She replayed the argument again and again, wondering why it had affected her so deeply. She told herself it didn't matter. People argued. Neighbors disagreed. That should have been the end of it. Yet every evening, as the sun lowered behind the hills, she found herself looking toward his ranch without meaning to. 3 days later, fate forced them together. A section of the old boundary fence finally gave way under strong wind. One of his animals wandered too close to her side, confused and restless. She saw it first and walked toward the fence line, intending to guide it back. He arrived moments later, rope in hand. They stopped a few feet apart, both clearly aware of the tension still hanging between them. "I'll handle it," he said, not unkindly. "I was already doing that," she replied. Another pause, not sharp this time, but careful. "Thanks," he added, softer, "for watching out." She nodded once. It needed fixing anyway. They worked side by side, neither speaking much. The quiet was awkward but not hostile. The wind moved through the grass, carrying familiar sounds. Slowly, the animal was guided back, the immediate problem solved. But neither of them moved away. "I've been thinking," he said finally, eyes on the fence post he was securing, "about what you said." She stayed quiet, letting him continue. "I didn't ask, and I should have." She turned toward him then, surprised by the honesty in his voice. "I don't like making assumptions," he continued, "but I did, and I'm sorry." The words settled between them, simple, direct, real. She took a breath, feeling some of the tightness in her chest ease. "I'm not easy," she said. "I know that." He looked up. "Neither am I." That earned a small smile from her, the first in days. They finished repairing the fence, but instead of walking away, they stood there, unsure of how to end the moment. The tension hadn't disappeared, it had changed shape. It felt closer now, more personal. "You ever feel like something's been building without you noticing?" she asked quietly. He met her gaze. "Yeah, I do." The honesty startled both of them. She crossed her arms, then let them fall again. "I don't usually let arguments get under my skin." "I don't either," he admitted. "But this one did." They stood closer now without realizing it. The space between them felt charged, like something fragile and powerful at the same time. Neither spoke, yet both felt the pull, the confusion, the emotion rising faster than thought. "You frustrate me," she said suddenly. He let out a short breath. "You frustrate me too." The words weren't angry, they were honest. "And yet," she added, voice lower now, "here we are." He swallowed, heart beating harder than he expected. "I don't know what this is," she nodded. "Neither do I." For a moment, it seemed like one of them should step back, say something sensible, end the conversation and return to safe distance. Instead, she took a step forward. It happened quickly, without planning. She reached out, placed one hand lightly against his chest, and before he could fully process it, she leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't long, it wasn't dramatic, but it was full of meaning. Time seemed to slow. His mind went quiet, replaced by pure awareness, her presence, the warmth, the surprise. The argument, the tension, the confusion, all of it paused in that single moment. Then she pulled back. The silence that followed was louder than anything before. He stood frozen, trying to understand what had just happened. His heart was racing, his thoughts scattered. He searched her face for answers, but her expression was serious, almost vulnerable. "I didn't plan that," she said softly. He nodded slowly. "I can tell." She took a step back, giving him space now. "I needed you to understand something." "What?" he asked, voice unsteady. "That what we're feeling isn't just frustration," she said. "It's something else, something real." He took a breath, grounding himself. "You could have just said that." She gave a small, sad smile. "Words don't always work." They stood there, the land quiet around them, both aware that nothing was the same anymore. "I don't regret it," she added after a moment, "but I needed to be clear." "Clear about what?" he asked. She looked at him, eyes steady. That moment wasn't confusion, it was choice. The weight of that settled deep in his chest. "I don't know what happens next," he said honestly. She nodded. "Neither do I. But pretending nothing's there won't work anymore." He watched her turn and walk back toward her land, every step measured and calm. She didn't look back this time. He remained where he was long after she disappeared from view. The fence was fixed. The problem was solved. Yet his world felt completely rearranged. That brief kiss had done what months of silence and arguments couldn't. It had stripped away excuses and forced truth into the open. As evening fell and shadows stretched across the valley, he knew one thing for certain. Whatever came next, there was no going back to how things were before. The night after the kiss felt longer than any night he could remember. He went home, but his body moved on habit while his mind stayed behind at the fence line. He fed the animals, washed his hands, and sat on the edge of his bed without turning on the light. Every small sound felt louder. Every thought led back to the same moment. He kept replaying it, not just the kiss itself, but everything around it. Her step forward. The steady look in her eyes. The way she pulled back as if she had crossed a line she had already accepted the cost of crossing. Sleep came in pieces, broken by half-dreams and sudden wakefulness. When morning arrived, it didn't bring clarity. It brought weight. Across the boundary, she was awake early too. She sat at her kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug she had already forgotten to drink from. She wasn't confused about why she had kissed him. That part was clear to her. What unsettled her was what came after, the silence, the waiting, the knowing that something honest had been set loose. She had lived most of her life being careful. Careful with words, careful with trust, careful with closeness. The land had taught her patience, but it had also taught her that some moments mattered too much to ignore. The kiss had been one of those moments. By mid-morning, neither could avoid the tension any longer. They saw each other again near the shared road, both pretending coincidence had brought them there. They stopped a few steps apart. The air felt tight but not hostile, just full. "I didn't expect to see you," he said. "Neither did I," she replied. Silence followed. Not the easy kind, not the angry kind, the kind that waits for truth. He took a breath. "About yesterday," she raised a hand gently, not to stop him but to slow the moment. "Let me say something first." He nodded. She looked at him directly, her voice calm but serious. "I don't do things without meaning, especially not something like that." His chest tightened. "I figured." She took a small step closer, not crossing into his space but closing the distance enough to make her point clear. That kiss wasn't confusion, it wasn't anger. He watched her carefully, afraid to interrupt. "It was just for you," she said. The words landed softly but carried weight. There was no challenge in her voice, no demand, just honesty. He felt something shift inside him, a mix of surprise and understanding. "Why?" he asked quietly. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked past him at the land stretching out behind his ranch, then back at his face. "Because you saw me," she said. "Not perfectly, not always correctly, but you tried, and that matters." He swallowed. "I messed up." "Yes," she agreed simply, "but you stayed." That truth hit him harder than any accusation had before. He had stayed. Through silence, through discomfort, through the argument. Even when he didn't understand her, he hadn't walked away. "I didn't know what to do with what I was feeling," he admitted. She nodded. "Neither did I, that's why I acted." They stood there, both exposed now, stripped of assumptions. The land around them felt steady, unchanged, as if giving them permission to speak honestly. "I'm not asking for anything," she continued. "Not promises, not explanations." "What are you asking for?" he asked. "For you not to dismiss it," she said, "not to pretend it didn't happen." "I couldn't even if I wanted to," he replied. That earned a faint smile. They began walking slowly along the road, not together but side by side, leaving space between them. Conversation came in small pieces, careful but real. She spoke about why she had returned to the land after years away, how distance had taught her what belonging truly meant, how being back had stirred memories she didn't always want to face alone. He listened without interrupting, without trying to fix anything, just listening. He spoke about his fear of change, how stability had been his shield after a life that once felt unpredictable, how letting someone get close felt like risking that balance. Neither judged the other. They recognized themselves in each other's caution. At one point, she stopped walking and turned to him. "If this becomes something," she said, choosing her words carefully, "it won't be easy." "I don't expect easy," he said. She studied his face, looking for doubt, for hesitation. She found neither. "Then understand this," she said. "I won't hide who I am. I won't shrink to make things comfortable. I wouldn't ask you to," he replied. "And I won't chase," she added. "If you need time, take it, but don't disappear." He nodded slowly. "Fair." The sun climbed higher, warming the ground beneath their feet. The conversation eased, no longer heavy but grounded. They didn't label what was happening. They didn't rush it. Before parting ways, she paused again. "Yesterday changed things," she said. "Yes," he agreed. "It did." She met his eyes one last time. "I'm glad it did." Then she turned and walked back toward her land. He watched her go, feeling something new settle in his chest. Not urgency, not fear, resolve. The days that followed were quieter but not empty. They didn't meet every day. They didn't talk constantly. Instead, they allowed space without distance. When they crossed paths, there was acknowledgement. When they spoke, it was honest. He noticed how the tension had softened into awareness, how the land felt different now, not because it had changed, but because he had. She noticed it too, the way he listened more than he spoke, the way he no longer assumed silence meant rejection. One evening, as the sky turned gold, they stood on opposite sides of the boundary again. This time there was no argument, no confusion. Just two people aware of a shared truth. Neither knew exactly where the path would lead, but both knew they were finally walking it with open eyes. Time did not rush forward after that conversation. Instead, it moved in a calm, steady way, like the land itself. Days passed, then weeks, and life slowly found a new rhythm. Nothing dramatic happened at first. No big gestures, no sudden changes, but everything felt different. He noticed it in small moments. When he woke up in the morning, his thoughts were clearer. The weight that had sat in his chest for so long was lighter now. He worked with more focus, but also with more patience. He didn't feel the need to avoid her land anymore. The boundaries were still there, but they no longer felt like walls. She noticed changes too. She felt less guarded, even when she was alone. The land felt more alive, as if it had recognized a shift she hadn't spoken out loud. She found herself humming while working, something she hadn't done in years. The quiet no longer felt like something she had to defend. They met naturally now. Sometimes it was near the fence, sometimes on the road, sometimes just a wave from a distance. Each meeting carried ease instead of tension. They talked about simple things, weather, repairs, animals, the way the valley looked in different seasons. Yet beneath those simple words was understanding. One evening, he brought over a repaired gate hinge he had promised to fix weeks ago. He handed it to her without ceremony. "Thought you might need this before winter," he said. She took it, her fingers brushing his briefly. The contact was small but meaningful. "Thank you," she said. "You remember things," he shrugged. "I try to." She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "That matters." They didn't rush into anything. There was no need. What they were building felt stronger because it was slow. Trust wasn't declared, it was practiced. One afternoon, she invited him to walk a section of her land she hadn't shown anyone before. It wasn't marked on any map. It didn't need to be. The ground there held stories, and she shared them carefully. She spoke about family, about returning, about how the land remembered even when people forgot. He listened, not asking questions that didn't need answers. When she finished, they stood quietly. "This place isn't easy," she said, "but it's honest." He nodded. "So are you." The words were simple, but they stayed with her. Later that week, the town hosted a small gathering. Normally, she avoided those events. He usually went only long enough to be polite. This time, they arrived separately but found themselves standing near each other. People noticed. Whispers started, but neither paid attention. At one point, someone made an offhand remark, the kind that carried old assumptions. Before she could respond, he spoke up, not loudly, not angrily, but firmly. He corrected the misunderstanding and made it clear where he stood. She looked at him, surprised. Not because he defended her, but because he did it without trying to be seen as a hero. Later, as they walked out into the cool evening air, she said quietly, "You didn't have to do that." "I know," he replied. "I wanted to." That was when she understood something important. He wasn't trying to claim her story. He was simply refusing to let it be reduced. As winter approached, the land grew quieter. Mornings were colder. Evenings came sooner. They spent more time together now, sometimes working, sometimes just sitting in silence. Silence no longer meant distance. It meant comfort. One evening, as the fire crackled in her fireplace, she spoke without looking at him. "I don't regret that day." He smiled softly. "Neither do I." They didn't talk about the kiss often. They didn't need to. It had done its job. It had opened a door that words alone could not. The relationship that formed wasn't dramatic or loud. It was steady, respectful, built on choice rather than urgency. They learned each other's rhythms, strengths, and limits. When misunderstandings arose, they addressed them instead of letting them grow. There were still differences, different histories, different ways of expressing emotion, but those differences no longer felt like obstacles. They felt like things to learn from. One quiet morning, standing near the same fence where everything had shifted, she looked at him and said, "Funny how one moment can change the direction of things." He nodded. "Only if you're brave enough to face it." She smiled, real and open. "I was." "Yes," he said. "You were." They didn't make promises about forever. They didn't need to. What they had was real, grounded in respect and understanding. The land bore witness, patient as always. And in the end, it wasn't the argument that defined them. It was the honesty that followed. The choice to stay.